The Ride of a Lifetime, Lessons Learned from 15 Years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company by Robert Iger. Picture yourself standing in Shanghai in June 2016. You're about to unveil the crowning achievement of your entire career, a $6 billion theme park called Shanghai Disneyland. This isn't just another project. You've invested 18 years of your life into making it happen. This park is 11 times the size of the original Disneyland. You've sat across the table from 3 different presidents of China, negotiating every detail. This is your grand finale, your mic drop moment. Open the park, take your bow, and ride off into retirement. Then your phone rings. The news is devastating. There's been a mass shooting at a nightclub in Orlando, Florida, just 15 miles from Disney World. You have over 70,000 employees in Orlando, and you're holding your breath, praying none of them were inside. But then it gets worse. Your head of security delivers the news that makes your blood run cold. Federal investigators have recovered the shooter's phone. They believe his primary target wasn't the nightclub at all. It was Disney World. He had walked through the park just hours before the attack, carrying a semi-automatic rifle and a pistol hidden in a child's stroller. Only the security at the entrance had turned him away. You're half a world away, trying to navigate the most important week of your professional life, while processing the nightmare of what almost happened. And then, right in the middle of this chaos, your head of parks pulls you aside. His face has gone pale. He whispers something that makes your stomach drop. There was an alligator attack in Orlando. A little boy, a 2-year-old named Lane Graves, visiting Disney World with his family from Nebraska, was dragged into the water by an alligator. He's missing. This was supposed to be your victory lap, your crowning moment. Instead, it has become the darkest, most heartbreaking week of your career. So what do? How do you lead when you're staring down not one but 2 unimaginable tragedies? How do you compartmentalize your own horror and grief long enough to host world dignitaries, deliver speeches, and cut ribbons with a smile, when inside you're completely falling apart? This is the world of Robert Iger, and his book, The Ride of a Lifetime, isn't just another CEO memoir, it's a masterclass in leadership under pressure. It's the story of a man who started at rock bottom, literally scraping gum from under school desks, and climbed his way to the helm of one of the most beloved and powerful companies on earth. Today, we're going to journey through that ride. We're going to discover the 10 core principles that guided him through moments like that brutal week in Shanghai, and through the massive, world-changing decisions that would reshape the entertainment industry forever. By the time we're done, you won't just know his story. You'll have a blueprint for genuine leadership, one built on courage, optimism, and a relentless pursuit of perfection that you can start applying to your own life right now. Every great story starts somewhere unexpected. For Bob Iger, his journey didn't begin in a gleaming boardroom. It began in a small, working-class town on Long Island, in a split-level house with a father he deeply loved, but who was also brilliant and complicated. His dad was a Navy veteran living with manic depression. Some nights, happy dad would come home. Other nights, it was sad dad. Young Bob learned to tell the difference just by listening to the sound of his father's footsteps on the stairs. This emotional unpredictability taught him early on to be the steady center of his family, the one who kept things together when they threatened to fall apart. His father's professional life was a string of lateral moves and disappointments. He saw himself as a failure, and he pushed his son hard to be productive, to use his time wisely, to find the success that had always eluded him. Iger made a quiet promise to himself. He would not live a life of disappointment. He didn't have visions of wealth or power, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not spend his days frustrated and unfulfilled. This drive led him to take any job he could find. He He shoveled snow, babysat, worked as a stock boy. At 15, he landed a summer job as a school janitor, and his very first task was scraping chewing gum from the bottoms of 1,000 desks. He jokes that it either builds character or at least builds a tolerance for monotony. But it built something else too. A work ethic, an understanding that you start at the bottom, and you don't complain, you just do the work. After a brief, unremarkable stint as a TV weatherman in Ithaca, New York, where he learned the valuable skill of delivering bad news, since the weather was gloomy for half the year, he landed his first real job at ABC in 1974. The position was studio supervisor, paying $150 a week. As he puts it, it was about as low as you could go on the ABC ladder. His job was simple: show up whenever they needed him, for whatever they needed. This often meant arriving at the studio at 4:30 in the morning for lighting setups on soap opera sets. It was the opposite of glamorous, but it taught him the nuts and bolts of how television actually worked. And it cemented a habit that has stayed with him his entire life: waking up early. To this day, he wakes up at 4:15 every morning. He says it's essential to create that space in your day, before the world starts making demands on you, to just think, and read, and let your mind wander. His time at the bottom wasn't just about hard work, it was also about integrity. He quickly discovered his boss was corrupt, using company money to pay for personal projects and furnish an apartment for his mistress. When Iger started asking questions, his boss found out and called him into his office. "You know what, Iger? You're no longer promotable," he said flatly. He was given 2 weeks to find another job in the company, or he was out. At 23, he thought his career was over before it had really begun. But on the company job board, which was literally a clipboard hanging on a wall, he spotted an opening at a legendary division, ABC Sports. Thanks to a contact he'd made working on a Frank Sinatra concert, he managed to get an interview and landed the job. It was the break that would change everything. And it introduced him to the first great mentor of his life, a brilliant, demanding, and relentless executive named Roone Arledge. Roone was the head of ABC Sports, and he was a television legend. More than anyone else, he invented the way we watch sports on TV today. Reverse-angle cameras, slow-motion replays, live satellite feeds. That was all Roone. He understood that broadcasting wasn't just about showing an event. It was about telling a story. His famous goal was to capture the human drama of athletic competition. But Roone's real genius, the lesson that shaped Iger more than any other, was what Iger calls the relentless pursuit of perfection. Roone was absolutely unwilling to settle for good enough. Iger saw it firsthand at that Sinatra concert. After a full rehearsal the night before the live show, Roone decided nearly everything needed to be scrapped and redone. The set, the lighting, Howard Cosell's introduction. The crew worked frantically, right up against an unmovable deadline, but the show that aired the next day was magnificent. Roone's mantra was simple: do what you need to do to make it better. This meant no excuses. You never said there wasn't enough time, or you didn't have the energy. You instinctively pushed back against the urge to settle. One day, early in his time at sports, Iger found himself standing next to Roone at a urinal. To his surprise, Roone started a conversation. "How's it going?" he asked. Iger, caught off guard, replied, "Well, some days I feel like it's tough just keeping my head above water." Without missing a beat, Roone looked straight ahead and said, "Get a longer snorkel." Then he walked out. Roone wasn't much for excuses. If he asked you to do something, you were expected to exhaust every possible method to get it done. If you came back and said it couldn't be done, he'd simply tell you, "Find another way." This relentless drive was inspiring, but it came with a shadow side. Roone could be a difficult boss. One day he'd make you feel like the most important person in the world. The next, he'd deliver withering criticism for reasons that were never quite clear. Many people at ABC Sports lived in fear of him. This taught Iger a second, equally important lesson. Excellence and fairness don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can strive for perfection without crushing the spirit of your people. It was a lesson he carried with him for the rest of his career. Years of hard work followed. Iger climbed through the ranks at ABC Sports, traveling the world, covering everything from the Olympics to cliff diving in Acapulco. Then, in 1985, everything shifted. ABC was bought by a much smaller company called Capital Cities Communications, run by two men named Tom Murphy and Dan Burke. Everyone at ABC was blindsided. Tom and Dan were the polar opposite of the slick, high-flying culture of ABC Sports. They were no-nonsense, church-going guys with a reputation for watching every dollar. The limos that used to line up outside ABC headquarters disappeared overnight. First-class travel was gone. But Tom and Dan brought something far more valuable. They believed in a simple philosophy. Hire smart, decent people, give them big responsibilities, and then step back and let them do their jobs. They valued ability over experience. As they put it, they bet on brains, trusting that talented people could learn and grow, even in unfamiliar territory. They were also two of the most genuinely decent people Iger had ever met. They treated everyone with respect, and they believed that true integrity was a kind of secret weapon. It was from them that Iger learned that genuine decency and fierce competitiveness could coexist beautifully. And it was Tom and Dan who took the biggest bet on Iger himself. After he proved himself during a chaotic Winter Olympics in Calgary where unexpected warm weather melted the snow and ice, forcing the team to improvise their coverage on the fly, Tom and Dan called him in. They were impressed with how he'd handled himself under pressure. They promoted him to number 2 at the entire ABC television network. He was 37 years old, had worked almost exclusively in sports, and knew absolutely nothing about daytime television, late night, or business affairs. But he said yes. His instinct was always to say yes to every opportunity, to prove to himself that he could handle things he'd never done before. A year later they called him again. The head of ABC Entertainment, the division responsible for all of primetime television, was being fired. They wanted Iger to take the job. He was stunned. "Look," he told them, "I appreciate your faith in me, but I haven't read a script since my TV writing course in college. I don't know this part of the business." They just smiled. "Aw, Bob, you'll be great," Tom said. This move to Hollywood taught him one of the most important rules of leadership: know what you don't know and trust in what you do. He arrived in Los Angeles and immediately put this into practice. The first rule, he says, is not to fake anything. You have to be humble. You can't pretend to know something you don't. He told his new team, all seasoned Hollywood veterans, "I need your help. You know this business, and I don't." Instead of being threatened, they embraced him. "Don't worry, Bob," one of them said, "we'll teach you." And they did. He spent his days in endless meetings with writers, directors, and stars, asking questions and just listening. He spent his nights reading stacks of scripts, trying to figure out what made a story work. But he also started to trust in what he did know. All those years watching Roone Arledge craft stories had taught him about structure, pacing, and clarity. He knew a good story when he saw one, and he saw one in a bizarre, surreal pilot from a cult film director named David Lynch. It was a strange drama about the murder of a prom queen in a small town. The show was called Twin Peaks. When he screened it for the senior executives from New York, they hated it. Too weird, too dark for network TV. But Iger fought for it. He remembered Roon's lesson: innovate or die. He felt network television had become boring and predictable, and this was a chance to put something genuinely original on the air. He convinced his bosses to let him take the risk. Twin Peaks premiered and became a cultural phenomenon. It was on the cover of Time magazine. Iger was hailed as a genius. And then, almost as quickly, it all fell apart. Audiences grew frustrated as the central mystery, Who Killed Laura Palmer, dragged on. Ratings collapsed. The show was canceled, and David Lynch publicly blamed Iger for its downfall. That same season, Iger took an even bigger risk. A producer named Stephen Bochco pitched him an idea: a police drama where the characters would burst into song. A cop musical. The show was called Cop Rock. Iger sensed from the moment he saw the pilot that it was probably going to be spectacularly bad. And it was. It premiered in the fall of 1990 and was pulled after just 11 episodes. It became the subject of late-night jokes and a permanent fixture on lists of the worst TV shows of all time. So in his first year, he had one of the biggest hits and two of the most infamous disasters in television history. And he says it was the disasters that taught him the most profound lesson of all: if you want innovation, you have to give people permission to fail. He told his team after Cop Rock was canceled, "We tried something big and it didn't work. I'd much rather take big risks and sometimes fail than not take risks at all." You can't be in the business of playing it safe. You have to be in the business of creating possibilities for greatness. His willingness to stand by creative people, even in failure, earned him immense respect in Hollywood. Stephen Bochco, the creator of Cop Rock, came back to him with another idea: a gritty, boundary-pushing cop show that would challenge the limits of network television. The result was NYPD Blue, one of the most acclaimed and successful dramas in ABC's history. Iger's star was rising. After turning ABC Entertainment into the #1 network, he was promoted again and again, moving dizzyingly fast up the corporate ladder. By 1994, he was president and chief operating officer of the entire company, Capital Cities, ABC, second in line to become CEO. And then, just as before, everything changed. In 1995, Michael Eisner, the celebrated CEO of the Walt Disney Company, made an offer to buy Capital Cities/ABC for $19.5 billion. One day, Iger was on track to run his own company. The next, he was being asked to join a massive new one. Eisner made it clear that the deal hinged on Iger signing a 5-year contract to stay on. It was a tough call. He had just gotten engaged to his wife Willow, who had a thriving career in New York. Moving back to Los Angeles would be a huge personal sacrifice, but the opportunity was impossible to ignore. Tom Murphy, his mentor, told him, "Pal, if you play your cards right, one day you'll run that company." He signed the deal, but his entry into Disney was anything but a fairy tale. Almost immediately, Michael Eisner hired a Hollywood super agent named Michael Ovitz to be the new president of Disney, placing him directly between Eisner and Iger. It was a disaster from day one. Ovitz was a brilliant agent, but he was completely unsuited for corporate life. He didn't do the homework, he was dismissive of details, and he had no idea how to manage a team. The relationship between Eisner and Ovitz quickly turned toxic. As Iger puts it, when the two people at the top of a company have a dysfunctional relationship, there's no way the rest of the company can function. It's like having two parents who fight all the time. The kids feel the strain. After a little over a year of chaos, Ovitz was fired in a very public, very messy exit that cost the company over $100 million in severance. For the next several years, Eisner ran the company without a number two. His relationship with Iger was a strange dance of approach and withdrawal. He would pull Iger in, confide in him, give him huge responsibilities like creating Disney's entire international strategy and beginning the first negotiations for a theme park in China, and then he would suddenly go cold, keeping him at arm's length. Meanwhile, the magic at Disney was starting to fade. ABC's ratings were in freefall. A string of expensive animated films like Atlantis and Treasure Planet were bombing at the box office. And the relationship with their most important creative partner, a small animation studio called Pixar, was completely broken. The tension was mostly between Michael Eisner and Pixar's CEO, Steve Jobs. The original deal between the two companies was heavily tilted in Disney's favor, and as Pixar produced hit after hit Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Monsters, Inc., Steve grew to resent what he saw as Disney's disrespect. Michael, for his part, felt Steve never gave Disney the credit it deserved. The animosity became so intense that in 2004, Steve Jobs publicly announced that he would never deal with Disney again. On top of all this, a public war erupted. Roy Disney, Walt's nephew, launched a campaign called Save Disney, demanding Michael Eisner's removal as CEO. He accused Eisner of mismanagement, of a creative brain drain, and of destroying the Pixar relationship. The pressure came to a head at a dramatic shareholder meeting in 2004, where an unprecedented 43% of shareholders withheld their vote of support for Michael. It was a crushing public rebuke. The board stripped him of his title as chairman, and a few months later, Michael announced he would retire. A search for his successor began. Iger was named the sole internal candidate, but the board made it clear they were looking for a change agent from outside. The consensus in the press and on Wall Street was that giving the job to Michael Eisner's number two would be a colossal mistake. What followed was a grueling 6-month process that tested Iger more than anything in his life. He was interviewed 15 times. He was publicly criticized and dismissed. Even former colleagues told him to his face that he had no chance. "You need to leave," one told him. "Your reputation has been tarnished." The stress was so intense that one day, at a basketball game with his young son, he suffered a classic anxiety attack, his chest tightening so much he was convinced he was having a heart attack. He realized he had to put everything in perspective. This was a big job, but it wasn't his life. He vowed to stay steady, to control what he could control, his own actions and attitude, and let go of the rest. It was during this time that he developed the clear, simple strategy that would define his entire tenure as CEO. A consultant told him, "You cannot win this on the defensive. It's only about the future, it's not about the past. And you only get 3 priorities. More than that, and they're no longer priorities." Iger landed on 3. They were simple, but they would become the roadmap for everything to come. 1. Devote most of our time and capital to creating high-quality branded content. In a world with an explosion of choice, quality and great brands would matter more than ever. 2. Embrace technology to the fullest extent. View technology as an opportunity, not a threat, and use it to create better products and reach consumers in more modern ways. 3. Become a truly global company. It wasn't enough to do business around the world. They had to deeply penetrate key markets like China and India. This was his vision. This was the future he pitched to a skeptical board. And in March of 2005, against all odds, they gave him the job. On his very first day as CEO, he told his team that their top priorities were to fix the broken relationship with Roy Disney and to try, somehow, to salvage the partnership with Steve Jobs and Pixar. He made peace with Roy by offering him what he truly wanted: respect. He gave him an emeritus role and an office on the Disney lot, making him feel like he was home again. Pixar was a much tougher problem. Iger knew he couldn't just ask Steve Jobs to change his mind. The bad blood ran too deep. So he came at it from a different angle. He called Steve not about movies, but about technology. He was a huge fan of the iPod, and he had a wild idea. What if there was an iTunes for television? What if people could watch TV shows on a new video iPod that Apple was secretly developing? Steve was intrigued. He flew down to Iger's office and showed him the prototype. "If we bring this to market," Steve asked, "will you put your television shows on it?" Without hesitating, without running it by lawyers or committees, Iger said yes. Steve was floored. He'd never met an entertainment executive willing to disrupt his own business model. The speed and boldness of the decision earned Steve's respect, and it cracked open the door to a bigger conversation. A week after Iger officially became CEO, he walked into his first board meeting with another radical idea. He presented a brutally honest assessment of the state of Disney animation. Over the last decade, it had lost nearly $400 million. The movies weren't good, and the brand was suffering. As animation goes, he told the board, so goes the company. Then he laid out his solution. We could buy Pixar. The room erupted. The idea was crazy. They were too expensive. Steve Jobs would never sell. But the board gave Iger a cautious green light. Go ahead and explore it, but be careful. He called Steve that afternoon. I have a crazy idea, he said. What do you think about Disney buying Pixar? He braced himself for rejection, for laughter, for Steve to just hang up. Instead, after a long silence, Steve said, "You know, that's not the craziest idea in the world." What followed was a masterclass in negotiation, built on respect and authenticity. Iger flew to the Pixar campus alone. He met with all the directors and saw what they were working on. Cars, Ratatouille, Wall-E, Up. He was breathless. The level of talent, the creative ambition, the technology, it was so far beyond anything Disney was doing. He promised Steve, and he promised Pixar's creative leaders, John Lasseter and Ed Catmull, that he understood their value wasn't just in their films. It was in their culture. Pixar needs to be Pixar, he told them. If we don't protect the culture you've created, we'll be destroying the thing that makes you valuable. He proposed not only that they continue to run Pixar, but that they also take over and revitalize the struggling Disney animation. In January 2006, after a passionate pitch from Iger, Steve, John, and Ed, the Disney board approved the deal to buy Pixar for $7.4 billion. Just an hour before the public announcement, Steve Jobs pulled Iger aside for a walk. He put his arm around him and shared something that only his wife and his doctors knew. His pancreatic cancer had returned. "I'm about to become your biggest shareholder," Steve said, "and I think I owe you the right, given this knowledge, to back out of the deal." Iger was stunned. He had 30 minutes to decide. He couldn't consult the board. Steve had sworn him to secrecy. He made a gut call. He told Steve he was moving forward. The deal was announced, and the two men, who had started as adversaries, became the closest of friends. The Pixar acquisition transformed Disney, but it was only the first step. Guided by his 3 priorities, Iger and his team looked for the next opportunity. They identified Marvel Entertainment, with its treasure trove of over 7,000 characters. The problem was, Marvel's CEO, Ike Perlmutter, was a reclusive and notoriously tough negotiator who wouldn't even take a meeting. After months of trying, Iger finally got in the door. He treated Ike with the same respect he'd shown Steve Jobs. He flew to New York alone, met him in his modest office, and simply listened. The key moment in the negotiation came when Steve Jobs personally called Ike Perlmutter. Steve told him that Iger was a man who kept his word. In 2009, Disney bought Marvel for $4 billion. Again, many were skeptical, but Iger's team saw the potential. They challenged old Hollywood assumptions that female-led and black-led superhero films wouldn't perform at the box office. The result was Captain Marvel and Black Panther, two films that each earned over $1 billion and became cultural phenomena. The third and final piece of the puzzle was Lucasfilm. Iger knew that for its creator, George Lucas, selling Star Wars wasn't just a business transaction. It was like selling his children. He approached George with immense sensitivity, telling him at a quiet breakfast, "Shouldn't you determine who protects or carries on your legacy?" He then waited patiently for 7 months until George called him back. The negotiation was difficult, especially around the issue of creative control, but it was always grounded in Iger's respect for George's legacy. In 2012, Disney acquired Lucasfilm for just over $4 billion. With Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm, Iger had assembled an unprecedented collection of high-quality branded content. He had rebuilt the creative engine of the company. But the world was changing again, faster than ever. The rise of streaming services like Netflix was threatening the traditional models of cable television and movie distribution. It was Roone Arledge's lesson all over again: innovate or die. Iger realized Disney had to become a disruptor of its own business. In a move that shocked Wall Street, he announced that Disney would pull its content from Netflix and launch its own streaming services, Disney Plus and ESPN Plus. This meant intentionally sacrificing hundreds of millions of dollars in short-term licensing fees for the hope of long-term growth. It was a massive gamble. To fuel this new strategy, he made one final, colossal bet. In 2017, he entered into negotiations with Rupert Murdoch to acquire most of 21st Century Fox. After a dramatic bidding war with Comcast, Disney acquired Fox for an astonishing $71 billion. The deal gave them a huge library of content, a majority stake in Hulu, and a massive international footprint, particularly in India. In April 2019, just weeks after the Fox deal closed, Iger stood on a stage and presented his vision for the future to a room full of investors. He unveiled Disney Plus, a service that would bring together the incredible worlds of Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and now, National Geographic and The Simpsons, all delivered directly to consumers around the globe. It was the culmination of everything he had set out to do since that first board meeting. The three pillars, great content, technology, and global reach, had come together in a single bold vision for the future of the Walt Disney Company. The ride, it seemed, was far from over. When you look back at Bob Iger's incredible journey, it's easy to get lost in the staggering numbers, the billion-dollar acquisitions, the record-breaking box office returns, but the real lessons of this book, the wisdom I hope you'll carry with you, are much quieter and far more personal. At its heart, The Ride of a Lifetime is a story about a handful of core values, held with unwavering consistency over a 45-year career. First, there's the profound power of humility. Think about it. This is a man who would one day negotiate with Steve Jobs and George Lucas, but he started by scraping gum off desks and taking orders from a corrupt, bullying boss. He never forgot what it felt like to be at the bottom. When he was put in charge of Hollywood, a world he knew nothing about, he didn't fake it. He walked in and said, "I need your help." That ability to admit what you don't know, to ask questions, and to genuinely listen isn't a weakness. It's the foundation of all real learning and growth. Second, there's the unwavering belief in excellence. Iger calls it The relentless pursuit of perfection, a lesson he learned from his tough-as-nails mentor, Roone Arledge. It's the refusal to settle for good enough. It's the drive to make something great, even when it's hard, even when it means tearing everything down and starting over. But Iger added a crucial ingredient that Roone often missed: fairness. He proved that you can demand the absolute best from people while still treating them with decency and respect. In fact, that's the only way to get their best in the long run. And finally, there's the quiet courage of integrity. Time and again, Iger faced moments where he could have taken the easy way out. He could have played it safe and avoided the risks of Twin Peaks or NYPD Blue. He could have let his ego get in the way and gone to war with Roy Disney. He could have listened to the doubters and shied away from the massive, insane bets on Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm. But he was always guided by a clear sense of right and wrong, and a belief that treating people with respect isn't just nice to do, it's how you make the impossible possible. The trust he built with Steve Jobs, Ike Perlmutter, and George Lucas wasn't based on complicated financial models. It was personal. It was based on the belief that Bob Iger was a man who kept his word. So, what can you take from this today in your own life? First, embrace the humble tasks. Whatever job you have right now, whether it's in a coffee shop, a retail store, or an internship, do it with excellence. The work ethic and humility you build when no one is watching are the foundation for everything that comes later. Second, innovate or die, even in your own life. The world is changing faster than ever. The skills that are valuable today might be obsolete tomorrow. Stay curious. Learn things outside your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to disrupt your own routines and assumptions to meet the change that's coming. And last, put people first. In any negotiation, any collaboration, any leadership role you take on, remember that a little respect goes a long way, and the absence of it can be incredibly costly. Don't let your ambition get ahead of your decency. True, lasting success is built on a foundation of trust and integrity. That was a summary of The Ride of a Lifetime by Robert Iger. We've touched on the major moments and the big lessons today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. The real magic happens when you actually travel there yourself. It's in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has struck a chord with you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning business strategy. It's an experience that can genuinely shift the way you see leadership, creativity, and your own potential. A link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next dive into another life-changing book from the Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.